pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Yes. I move to approve the agenda with the following amendments. Additional certified and classified personnel actions for consideration. Item E3. Add item E-4E, Jenny Parker Elementary School Staff Handbook and Jenny Wilson Elementary School Staff Handbook. And add item E-4F, contract for fast forward software between Scientific Learning and Garden City Public Schools.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mark. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed, same sign. Great. We'll move on to delegations, Q&A, or public comment. Stephanie, do you have any? Thank you. And any public comments? All right. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Yes, I move to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Does that work, Steve, or you're gonna read out? Good, good. Can I get a second? Second. Okay, thanks, Jennifer. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed, same sign. We'll move right into the curriculum reports, and our first report is the Kansas School for the Deaf Partnership. Mr. Guy? I don't know if anybody notices, but on the new, agenda, they now in parentheses have, BG, and it gives a number, and that stands for the board goals. So just FYI for everybody. Thank you for doing that. Okay.
So this is Susie Gum. Susie Gum is our teacher for the deaf and hard of hearing, and she's going to talk about our blended classroom that we did with the Kansas School for the Deaf. And this kind of, just like you said, Rich, is our goals for KISA goal under relationships, communities and community partnerships, and it's also a board goal as well. So I'll let Susie have it.
Okay.
And Susie, we don't, oh, we do. It's up, I think. Let's just have it. I'll do this while you talk.
Okay. All right, she said, let us know when you're ready, so I just sent a text. Yes, I'm Susie Gum, teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing. Thank you for letting me come and tell you about this program. I have an interpreter with me this evening, and this was kind of a last minute decision. I was visiting with Linda, and this is just to show you what our interpreters do every day. It can be very taxing, especially when teachers are long-winded. There is usually only one interpreter in a classroom, but we have a kind of a unique situation where we actually have 7 deaf and hard of hearing kids in one grade. And 4 of them require an interpreter. And Deidre Osborne, she is the one that's going to have all 4 of them next year. So I also have Robert Laredo with me, and he is at Horace Good, and he has only the 1 student this year. And just to show you how things would work in a perfect signing situation, if you have 2 or more interpreters, they tend to switch off, and that is to rest their hands so they can kind of regroup. Now, for the amount of time that I'm going to be talking, we wouldn't really need to switch, but just to kind of show you what we do, is a demonstration more than anything else. Okay, thank you for letting me come, and the partnership that we have with Kansas School for the Deaf was a result of their outreach team. And oh, looks like we have them on there now. Okay, so, but we'll get to him in just a minute. They know that I was going to tell you a few things. This year, we have 22 identified students that are hearing impaired on their IEP. And of those 22 students, 12 receive direct services from me, while the other 10 students are on consult services. And what that means is just that I keep in touch with the teachers and make sure that everything is proceeding as normal for that child. And if there are any situations that arise because of hearing loss, then I work with that teacher and we try to brainstorm on what we can do to help. We have 5 signing paras that are working on becoming certified interpreters, and I think they're all going to go take their test in November, and so that's really exciting, kind of nerve-wracking for them, but it is exciting. One of the biggest obstacles that our children have is, because of that, is a result of why we wanted to do this partnership when we were approached with it. Let's see. 9 of the students that have interpreters, 8 of them are trilingual because they are from another country, and because they did not have hearing aids in their country, they didn't get that language at the critical language age. So they are trying to learn their native language. Then of course we want them to learn the English language. And for 3 of these students, sign language actually ended up being their primary language, because when they came to us, they literally had no language. And that was at 5 and 6 years old. So that has been, though, so exciting to see those kids go from literally underneath the table, on top of the table, to being, great kids that are learning. Approximately 3 million children in the U.S. Have a hearing loss, and 90% of those children are born to hearing parents. This is where the language deprivation is also added in. I think it's because of they're not really wanting to face that their child is going to need help for the rest of their life. And some of it is cultural too, that they don't want to acknowledge. So because of that, our students are very language deprived. So we are working with Kansas School for the Deaf, who I would like to now introduce. I'm not sure where they are.
He was just there.
Yeah.
He was trying to watch the interpreter.
There's an interpreter on his side. The teacher was born deaf, and this is Anthony Bishop. And he's going to rearrange a few things. Joan Macy is also, I think, on that side, and she is the coordinator for the outreach program. Ready?
I think he texted you. You want to check your phone?
Can you see us? I can't hear you. So he's not picking up anything that we're saying. Any tech people have any ideas?
I guess we try to phone call.
There's not a mic on your desktop, you're gonna have to call in.
Do they have a phone number we can call?
I could just probably call this.
I thought
I guess worst case scenario, you could have Robert sign to him and, introduce sign.
Well, that's-
So that you didn't have to hear it.
You can tell I'm not a big texter. Maybe should I try to communicate with him that way?
Susan, you probably can't see you either.
there's facilities, you can try to.
I'm sorry?
The conference room set up, so if you have a cell
He
number.
just typed to us, he said, can you see us?
We could try to call them.
Yeah, let's just call them on that phone, Susan.
Okay.
That'll work, as long as we can hear them. Uh-oh.
No, they can't see us, okay. So that's not good.
Technology's awesome.
Yeah,
It
Joan,
works.
I guess
Sorry,
we're not
guys.
having any luck on this side. Would there be a chance we could do a conference call?
Leave the video on.
We can see them fine.
We can see, we just need to do a conference call.
We can see you. I'm sorry, what was that? Just a minute, Joan. Let me put this on speaker, okay? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so want Anthony to, go ahead and introduce himself now?
Yes,
It's hard to, we can't see you guys, so we don't know what's going on.
I apologize for that.
Let's see if we can call them on that where we can hear them better.
Can we call you on this same number and so that it can be projected louder so people can hear?
Yeah, I mean, you can call this phone number.
Okay. Okay, I'll call you right back, Joe. Hi, Joan. Okay, you are on big speakerphone.
Okay, then, the main part of the report, that you don't have a camera on the computer that you're using, because we can't see you guys.
I don't think we have a camera.
No, we have realized that we do not have a camera. That's why you can't see us.
Oh, that is just all I found. Like a blind idiot, you can't see who I'm talking to.
So if he'd like to go ahead and introduce himself and tell a little bit about the program, that'd be great.
All right, good evening, everybody. This is a new service from the School for the Deaf that we started last year. We started it last fall, and I've been working with the Garden City School District since about November, December of last year. We have 3 groups that I've been working with, a pre-K, a 3rd grade, and a middle school group. And the goal of this service is to provide more exposure to language for our deaf and hard of hearing students from a certified teacher for us. And then the staff that are working with those kids can also pick up some language at the same time, because we're going to be in that same environment. And so this is when we give access to those rural sites. So this is one of the websites that we use where I can project any kind of book that is might be used in a general classroom. So let me give you an example of a book right now. So sometimes the book will be trilingual actually, because we'll have Spanish in there as well. So that's really nice out as a teacher. I can run through the book by clicking a step that's on the bottom of my table here, and that's how I look at the book. So kids can see the words and see the pages as I'm reading the book to them. And then through there we have discussion, and I ask them about vocabulary or comprehension. Make sure they're understanding the story that I'm saying. Okay, 1 second here. I can use the book that the teacher has already covered that week within class, and so I can serve as one of the review, and then the teacher can take some language data to see if the students are recalling the vocabulary that they've been learning over the past 2 weeks in the classroom. Or I can have new books. Do you guys have any questions about the program or how it works?
Any questions? Yeah.
Do the students just see the book on the screen, or do they have a copy of it?
No, it's just on the screen, and Anthony is to one side, and I actually have a video clip of some of our kids involved. We could go to that video. So Joan, we're gonna go to a video clip real quick.
Okay.
Okay.
Wrong button. Oops. That one, or this one?
That one. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm gonna set this up for you. This is our group of 3 third graders, and we were talking about safety. And so I visited with Anthony and asked him to do a book that week about safety. And we decided to go, he did a very basic book, and I'm gonna show you just a minute or so of him doing the book with the kids. You'll notice that he doesn't actually read the words. That's not what he's, well, you might not notice, but he's not signing word for word. He's signing the meaning of what's on that page. And what we found out was these 3 boys, so they're third graders, so they've sat through kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. When counselors do their presentation on stranger danger, they had no idea. And it's not because of anything that was lacking in what was presented, it was because their language level is so low that when we thought they understood, we found out they didn't. So the first clip is just of Anthony with the kids doing part of the story.
No. Oh. Is it Grandpa? Do you know him? See. Yes or no? No.
So what he just asked
Why
them there
yes?
was, so this is, these are some kids. They're kind of like you. Could you ask them for help if you were lost? And their thought was, yeah, they're just like us. And one, the little boy says something about them playing basketball. So because they play basketball, then they must be okay. And then he also did that with a mother and a baby. And then the grandfather is who he was talking about right there at the beginning. The next one,
Go to the next.
yeah. Once we finished the book, we asked, what would you do if you found yourself alone or lost? And it's a 22-minute video, and for about 10 of it, we spent trying to get them to understand that there can be a time where they will be absolutely alone and need help. And they never did grasp it. So here he's saying, what do you do if mom and dad,
So if you went in to wake up mom and dad and they didn't move, what would you do?
Your mom.
and he's explaining, I would talk to mom.
Who would you call? Who would you tell? No, if you can't, mom won't wake up. Call who?
who?
Who would
know
you
a
call?
number?
Huh? 911.
So they have one that, 911.
1, 2, 3.
That's good. So what he went on to explain was, what are you gonna say then? If you do call 911, what are you gonna say to them? And so, as you might guess, that is definitely gonna be one of our goals this year, to really make sure they understand. And now these boys are bright boys. It has nothing to do with their intelligence. It just has to do with the fact that, you know, those critical years, they just did not have language. And so by working with KSD, because of course for KSD, American Sign Language is their native language. And so this is helping our students. Joan, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay. Joan, can you say just a couple words about the outreach and what you guys are doing within the state?
Sure. And if you notice a little bit of a lag with my speaking, I'm signing and speaking at the same time, which is not ideal, but I will make sure that Anthony has complete access as well as you guys do.
Oh, okay, that sounds great.
So, as Anthony said, this program was just set up last year, but our outreach services actually started back in 1974. We do an FM sharing assistance devices leasing programs to districts throughout the state. So we look through like FM system and kind of a mic that goes to the hearing aid or implant. We do a program throughout the state on that. And then we also do free consultations where we actually have members of our team actually go out to the district and spend a day observing the field and interviewing the staff and the team to find out what's working, what's not working, and how we can improve the services that we're providing for our students. And again, that's at no cost to the district. Same with blended learning, that is at no cost to the district as well. We also do comprehensive reevaluations for students. Those happen on our campus. It is a 2-day process. Then we get in contact with us for that service because we realize you need not only the expertise in psychology or speech language therapy, or education, also need that education component because the test results are definitely part of the and with a normal hearing child. And so we're able to provide the expertise in those domains when we evaluate. When we finish that, we move to school team and have a review the results. And then we have 2 weeks look into a full report that has all the results, recommendations, and resources that the school district can use to improve the services that they're giving to the kiddos. We also provide free services. We network with the Tiny Pay. This is our definition for families. So it's the deaf person that actually sits at home and works with the parents on how to interact with their child, learn the language, and how to work with deaf and some experienced kids. We also provide teacher mentoring and administrative support. Oftentimes we'll be asked to go to an IEP meeting, bring in kind of a nickel pair of eyes. Are we providing everything that the kids need, or is there any way that we can improve our services? And so we're able to provide that administrative support to the district, as well as mentoring to the teachers of the deaf and the interpreters that are out in the field. So, for example, I come out and spend several days with students, and I just kind of shadow along with her to different schools, and then they're able to talk about how the kids are doing, what resources they might need, what other services KSD can provide, and so forth. And then we also provide professional development training so that the staff that are working at the local level are getting the best evidence-based practices to apply within their own district. So that kind of gives you just a little bit of a quick summary of some of the services that we can provide.
Thank you, Joan. Okay, I just wanted to show you the last thing. I'm really proud of Chelsea Sheffer. She's a preschool teacher. This was a day that I actually, another teacher had scheduled an IEP meeting at the day and time that I'm usually at Garfield. And Chelsea was brave enough to take this on with no interpreter, no nothing. It's just her and the kids. Just a couple seconds to show you another way that we're using KSD. In the classroom, there's actually only one student who is hard of hearing, but with this class, Anthony is just introducing just simple signs so they can build their vocabulary as they get older and are with the student.
Ooh, there's stuff growing. This is green. You guys make green? Make it deep. Like the other one. Make it deep. Green. Green. Good job. You guys see the chameleon?
Yeah, I see it.
Oh, you're on top of the leaves. There we go. We're trying to hide. Where is the chameleon?
I see it.
There it is. Yep. With a brown. Maybe with a brown.
So it's really fun for the other classmates also to be involved. I really want to thank Linda and Tracy because they had the opportunity to meet with Anthony when he first came to show us what they had proposed, and they just jumped on board so quickly, seeing that this would be a great opportunity for our kids, and it really has been. So thank you for letting me share with you about this. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. If not, yes, well, okay. Anthony, is there anything that you would like to add? Or Joan?
We're aware that many kiddos arrive at the school, either preschool or in kindergarten without really any appropriate language level, because oftentimes parents are going through a grieving cycle of having a hard of hearing child. And so this opportunity has really been a win-win situation so that the kids can learn sign language, and then we also have family time samples where the parents can learn sign language. We know there's not a lot of their role models out throughout the state, and so we really want to provide that resource. So we're working on developing the language for the kids as well as the parents.
Thank you.
Y'all have any questions for us?
I have one, at the risk of sounding silly. For the kids that can't speak, if they dial 911, how do they communicate?
Joan, go ahead.
So, let me repeat the question, make sure that I understood it. It's a little bit hard to hear you guys, but if the deaf person calls 911, how do they communicate? Is that correct?
Yes, that was the question.
So Anthony, respond as well. For today, nowadays, we've got so many options. We've got what's called video phone and video relay service. And that's been around for a few years now. And so you can request a free video phone within your home if you have a child who is deaf or hard of hearing. It's a free federal program. And you can also get video phones within your schools as well. You just need to have a high-speed internet connection. And so when you call 911, you actually are calling into an interpreter center that connects you then with the police.
And usually once a year, we try to offer that to our students' families so that they would have that capability in their home. Not a lot of them take advantage of it.
What is it?
Right, and this is Joan talking now. Another thing is, when you call 911, oftentimes they will have an identification location, and so at least the police or the fire or the sheriff will know where the call is from, so they can go and check it out. And the carrier for the deaf and hard of hearing has been working with the Sheriff's Association throughout the state education that's implemented, so the deaf person home alone, and when you have a heart attack and they couldn't vocalize or sign or anything, that the sheriff would still be able to find where the child is going to small investigate.
And Mr. Cruz, your question is, why don't they take advantage of that? And because this is just my guess, a lot of it is lack of understanding on the parents' part, because their thought is, my child isn't using, they're not using the phone, or, hey, my child has a phone, a mobile phone. So that's probably something that we could do better on in educating the parents. And something that, I didn't realize is that we could get one for the school, and that would be great for the students to practice on. So,
I have a question. How much does it cost Garden City School District to work with KSD?
like Joan said, nothing. This is a free service. They understand that we are in a rural area, and we need all the help that we can for our kids.
Then how do they support their program? I'm just curious.
Joan, did you hear that question at all?
I did not. Please repeat it.
Sure. The question was, if you are not charging for your services, and you are not, then how are you able to sustain?
That's a very good question. We did that quite a bit, actually. We are actually a state agency, so we are funded directly from the legislature. So our funding is completely different than a typical public school system. We are funded differently. So when we have kids that actually come to KSD from throughout the state, we're not considered, are not 100% that actually come to KSD as a student for the school year, there is no cost to the district to send it this year. We are absolutely free. The only cost involved is the cost of transportation, and this is 80% reimbursable from the state. So theoretically, easy math for me, if you take $100 to pay for the van, to get up here, then you get $80 back in your pocket from the state. The same would apply to our USI program, our extended school year program. We have several kids from throughout the state come to us for ES1, but they have that opportunity for direct instruction, like to be in an environment with other peers who are deaf and hard of hearing. There is a slight fee for that program, but again, you can file paperwork with the state and you will get that money back. You have to do the special ed service.
Okay, thank you. And we had 3 children that were actually going to attend this summer, and Linda and I, we tried to get everything ironed out, and in the end, we just weren't able to make it work with transportation, just a lot of different things. I had a severe illness in my family that was taking a lot of my time, and so anyway, we weren't able to make it work this year, but we are going to try to make that work for them this fall and summer. So.
Question, basically, this is, for the elementary level, I understand KSD's, but do we have involvement by KSD? You had talked about, being a middle school teacher, but how about high school? Do we use services from?
Sure. Currently, we do not. We only have one student who is identified and requires services. And so at that point, we haven't really had a lot of questions for KSD, but they are certainly there to help. And the third, it's not a group, but there is another child that will be 8th grade this year that Anthony meets with weekly. So we are in all levels. And KSD actually goes through senior high school.
So how do you get parents, especially I'm thinking of the ones that you said, this is their third language, so they may not come in with any, do you get those parents to come in and learn sign with their children, or?
Very rarely. And that is not uncommon though for hearing parents of deaf children. I was reading some statistics prior to coming, and it's like 80%, it was unbelievably high, of parents that do not learn the language. And now in our case, where we have so many nationalities, I'm sure that is a lot of it. But again, because of cultures, some of it is just not confronting the fact that my child needs something special. So.
And then our parents that are learning sign, so if they have hearing, okay. I didn't know if you were hearing or not.
Yeah. And every year we offer a class to, well, it's actually to parents and teachers that are interested. And we really promote it in the schools where our students are. And we offer a sign class for anyone that would like to come. And of course, to the parents, it's free, well, to the teachers, it's free also. But it's been several years since we've had any parents take us up on that. That's a personal goal of mine this year. And Joan, you might be able to answer that question, or a question that I have. You have recently started a online ASL class. Is that correct? For the school year, that is, for parents?
That is correct. That is correct. And so we offer a program called Family Time Kansas. It is a free online program for any family, and we give together a broad term of families. We had one family that even brought in grandma and grandpa, and brought a babysitter in, and then everybody was on child environment learning time, so that she had a consistent language model. And we are fine with that. However many people you can sit around the monitor, that's fine with us. It is a free service. We send out a little application for the parents, they let us know what day and time is best for them. And then we match them with the teacher. So if it's Tuesday morning at 9 or Thursday evening at 7, we have a teacher that will match their schedule and have a family that is time and convenient for them. And we do have a person that's bilingual herself. So this is not by hearing certified interpreters or teachers of the deaf or by deaf people. We do have one person, like I said, this school is Spanish and ASL. And we try to rotate them through because at first they'll have the parents will be a little bit shocked that they have a deaf teacher and they'll think, how am I going to make this work? Realize that through the quality curriculum, the vocabulary, they'll have to another conversation with the deaf adult. And then that gives them the kind of the courage to impose that language development at home and within the natural community.
Does that help?
Does the district or your department, I guess, offer any type of sign language classes for hearing students, perhaps that want to use that in high school as a foreign language?
At this time, we don't have anybody that would be certified to teach that. I know that at Edith Sharman, I'm hoping this year to get their sign club started again. They have a sign choir, which I think everybody knows about. And they used to have a sign club, and that met once a week. Used to be in the morning. They would take their breakfast to the room that was designated, and we would just spend time teaching signs. And a lot of our actual students, our deaf and hard of hearing students would join us, and it was just great to be able to include peers so that our students had more access to communication. So that's something that I'm hoping to get started, and as our kids move up, continue that, so like a sign club in middle school, a sign club in high school. So that's the hope. Anybody else?
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Interesting and, so, thank you.
Joan, thank you so much. I think we are done here.
Well, thank you guys so much for the opportunity to let us share our program, and please use our name in vain. You can just let people know that we are here to serve you, and we're happy to drive out to our city anytime you need us.
That sounds great. Thank you, Joan.
Anthony says, I really look forward to continuing the collaboration this year. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. and thank you, right?
Thank you.
For coming to sign for us tonight too, that's really
Yes.
fascinating, and we really appreciate you taking your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely, guys, have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the Kansas Education Systems accreditation. We didn't get a chance because we couldn't see us.
I
You
know.
gave us a good lesson.
They were wonderful. All right, we're gonna talk a little bit about the KISA process, the accreditation process. And what I'm gonna do is take you through the actual reporting format so that you can understand what the process is and what we ended up doing for the end of year 2, which was this last June was our OBT visit, our outside visit. So the first thing that we did, and I think was really important for all of our staff, and we just talked about this with principals at their retreat, is that we took your board goals and we aligned them with the KISA goals that we had. So that, as I told the principals, we're not doing one more thing, 2 more things, 3 more things. This all is the same thing. It's called a little bit different depending on whether you're talking KISA or your 5-year strategic plan, but the goals all align perfectly. And it's just, like I said, it arose by any other name. So every year, as part of the KISA process, we have to update where we are in what they call the foundational structures. So these are the areas, so it doesn't matter what our goals are, doesn't matter that we want to work on rigor, they say that we have to update how we're doing and show progress in each of these foundational areas. So we're not working on just having good relationships with staff, we're still showing that we have a tiered system of support, communication, all of these different areas. So what I'm going to do now is walk you through each of these areas and just real briefly show you some of the highlights that we shared with our team and with KSDE. For tiered supports, the areas that have the stars by them, Fast Bridge, our ELA adoption, and Fast Forward, those were brand new this last school year. So we really focused on how we added to the screening process and then what interventions we added. Stakeholder engagement, we brought the Scholastica company in and they worked with our principals and our teachers on how to better engage parents. So it's, instead of just coming in and saying, this is our math curriculum, what kinds of things can we do with them and teach them to do with their children? So we kind of upped that game a little bit, if you will. We also had a data collection tool. Heath actually kind of kept track of that for us. But we had 363 parent involvement events that were logged district-wide this last school year. Under diversity and equity, of course, we have 40 different languages. We do pay a stipend to our teachers that have their ESOL endorsement. We provide parents with a resource guide when they come to us. And we have a special framework that all of our teachers are instructed in called VOICE, and that stands for Vocabulary, Objectives, Interaction, Comprehension, and Evaluation, which helps us address each of those different needs for our ESOL learners. Under communication and basic skills, we really focused on our new ELA curriculum here, and there you see a sample of the framework, or I think that's 3rd grade. And if you notice, it still has draft because this is brand new this year and we're going to work through those kinks. So we left it in draft form so we can make changes as we go. But we also, I have a little asterisk there. One of the other things we kind of bragged on to our visiting team was the robotics. For civic and social engagement, we focused on our civic advocacy network schools, as well as some of the other activities that some of the other schools did. Collecting the pennies for leukemia and some of those things that I talked about, I think, a couple of board meetings ago. Under the physical and mental health, and I'm going to pass out a sheet here in just a little bit to explain a little bit about what we're talking about. But when we go through and talk about the different areas, modeling is as high as you can get in each of these areas.
And for most of the areas under the physical and mental health areas, we are in the modeling area. So it has to do with a lot of what Tracy Johnson's program covers, the nutritional guidelines, giving all students, including special needs, opportunity for activity, having licensed PE teachers, and being certified in a curriculum called Let's Move, allowing community members access to our facilities, and having schools that participate in activity challenge awards. So we are all in the modeling area, those and several other areas. Arts and cultural appreciation, I just put pictures up here because, wow, do we do a lot, and we just recognized some of our students at the last board meeting for some of the arts and cultural appreciation area. So we have, when we submit it to the state, they allow us 8,000 characters, not specific letters, but that includes spaces and everything. And I think when Renee finished this section, she had like 4 pages, and we had to come up with a way to condense it. So I didn't even try tonight, I just put pictures of some of the stuff that we've done. Post-secondary and career preparation, these are the things that we highlighted, the career cruising, career fairs, job fair. Under the career centers, it's kind of hard to see, but there were 30 admission reps that were at the high school this year. They also did the ACT prep, they have a college application day, and there is a Garden City Community College liaison that comes up to the college and helps them fill out their FAFSA form or applications. However, she can be helpful in getting them ready for that next step. After we do the foundations, then we have to pick 2 areas that we want to work on, 2 goal areas. So the first year, 2 years ago, Garden City picked relationships and relevance. And again, we tied that when we reported out this year to our visiting team to our board goals and showed them that we are listening to what you say is important, we're looking at what the state is saying is important, and we're merging those 2 things. So we picked board goal 3.4, which is assessing the indicators of unhealthy behaviors, and board goal 3.5, which is community partnerships, like what you just saw with KSDE. Area 2, we chose relevance, and relevance has to do with what you guys refer to as rigor. So the state actually has a goal called rigor, but it has to do with career and technical ed, how we use our data, professional development, things like that. So when we talk about the lessons that the kids are actually receiving, the state calls that relevance. So again, same meaning, but they use a different language there. Our board goals that we chose for this area was the AVID implementation, challenging and rigorous academic experiences, and the comprehensive technology plan. After we pick our goal areas, then they ask us a set of questions, and we have to answer each one of these questions for those 2 goal areas. So what are your priorities? What trends do you see in your district, for example? How are you meeting the needs if you see a need when you go through the process? How are you addressing that? What strategies are you using? What professional development? And then what indicators are you going to say, oh, we've made progress because we got this far? So we have to answer all of these questions for each one of those goals that we choose. So an example, I chose the relationship one. The professional learning, we have done some training with trauma-informed schools. We did CHAMPS training, which is a classroom management technique. And we did the parent engagement training through Scholastic. The indicators that we use to determine our progress then is the discipline data, the SABRS data, and our intervention data that we have. So for relevance then, what strategies, I chose this question to answer for you just as an example. What strategies will you employ to achieve your goal? And we're doing the AVID training for all of our middle school and high school in September. We use an e-walkthrough tool to assess implementation of AVID and the rigorous curriculum. We use instructional coaches and principals, and we have a committee that is evaluating the technology plan and is going to present back to the board. We had our outside visiting team come in June, and as part of the process, they write a very lengthy report on everything that we've done, and it is also submitted along with our report. They give us pros and cons and things that they think are maybe a need. What I pulled from the report, because it pretty much repeated a lot of what was in ours, this was the only area that they saw was probably a need, if you want to call it that. But that is having a hard time recruiting, and we know that that is the case. And this is an exact quote from our OBT chair's report. And in it, as you can see, he says, like most of the region, we've had to staff with long-term subs, transition to teaching, and various partnerships, and we're working to get promising local individuals into programs. So he didn't just say, they're not doing anything. He's recognizing in his report to the state that we're doing everything we can to try to fill those positions, but along with several other districts, we still have difficulty filling all of those positions. So next year is year 3, and that's considered the mid-cycle year. So we have to do a review with them. And the important part this year is going to be analyzing the data and showing this is what we looked at, and so this is what we did because this is what the data said. So it's no longer just the saying, these are our goals and this is what, what we're gonna try to do better. We actually have to show the progress now. So, and that's like the third bullet point there, I think. What are we using to monitor that progress? And then how are we communicating what we do with that? And before I take questions, or as I take questions, I'm gonna pass out two of the charts that we use. What we're giving you are the rubrics for relationships and the relevance frameworks. We have to do a self-assessment using these rubrics, and then this is what we use to show progress. So as you can see, we have no evidence implementing, transitioning, and modeling. So the goal, of course, is to get to the modeling, but honestly, that's not where we started at in year 1. We've seen a lot of progress, I believe. But this is what we'll use again, then at the end of the year to show where we're heading, where we've gotten to. It's quite a lengthy process, and it is not a check the box and you're done kind of process. And it requires a lot of self-reflection on the part of the staff. Yes, question?
Is part of that sort of due to Kansas education trying to move in a direction of innovation and therefore not the cookie cutter check the box approach?
Correct. One of the things I found out just this last week actually is they also are all considering to reinvent this as they go. And these charts and frameworks that you see here are actually going to be coming out brand new in January. So they're changing it up midstream for us. Not every district is in year 3, but what they've suggested is that we continue to use this through our first cycle, so through year 5, but bring in the other frameworks as well, just so that we can see those. And they do include a lot of the redesign components that you're talking about.
Can you explain, I guess I don't understand the no, that first box, the no evidence. What would be in there? What should be in there? What could be in there? Will it ever have anything in there?
We don't want to be there very often. I mean, there will be some. And for example, if you look down to support for building district leaders on that first page for relationships under staff. So this is saying that for principals that have been in the district for 3 or more years, we still have a peer mentoring system, and we still do peer observations and things like this. This is for building in district leaders. So if we haven't done that, then we would be starting out in no evidence.
Well, quite for sure what you're supposed to do in that, so, thank you.
noticed on the staff relationships and staff component with modeling, surveys, PLCs.
Yes.
Haven't we done that before?
Yes.
Or I thought so, but you know, that communication is always such a challenge. In surveys, we always talk about, well, can you over-design them so that you only get what you want as a result of the survey, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But that mission of a truly collaborative environment, I think sits so well with that. So just a comment.
Right, and then not only, what we need to do this year is not only show that we've taken the survey, but what do we do with the survey once we take it? So one of the examples that I used with the principals this last week was if we do, say our ASQ, the kindergarten screen, and it shows that a number of our students have delays in fine and gross motor skills, then we took that data and we implemented additional centers that require movement and fine motor activities. So we saw that, yes, we recognized that in our data and we did something with it.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're ready for activities report. Mr. Tun, congratulations on your recent national winner.
Thank you. Yeah, July 13th.
Congratulations.
Thank you. People say I dress better now that I'm married. I don't know who that would be. So what I'm going to do is we're going to kind of review what happened last year with activities and kind of move forward in what we're looking for this year. Last year, it was a really good year for Garden City athletics and activities. Very successful on the field, music-wise, art, debate, forensics, all of those things. We had a very successful year. In total, we scheduled over 1,000 games, and over about a 7-week period from the Round Ball Classic through state debate, through the Rocky Welton. When I met with the CVB, we ended up generating over $1 million in revenue for the city of Garden City just between those 3 events. So the Rocky Welton, it was the largest Rocky Welton we've ever had with 48 teams. It's become the premier tournament in the Midwest, not just the state of Kansas, but it's become the premier tournament in the Midwest with teams from New Mexico, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Colorado, Kansas, obviously. It's become the largest tournament in the Midwest. State debate, a very successful state debate. You guys kind of got an update on that after that happened. It was a little rocky with a bunch of snow getting dumped on us at the same time state debate was going on. But we really appreciate John and his crew for getting that cleaned off. And then the Round Ball Classic is what started it all off. And again, it was our largest Round Ball Classic. Last year was actually our largest gig that we'd ever had since I've been collecting it. And Alice looked back over 10 years for basketball at Garden City High School. So a very successful year, another very good year for Garden City athletics and activities. Board goals that we're going to talk about: 4-1, graduation and dropout rates, or excuse me, 1-4, 1-5, social emotional awareness, 1-6, civic responsibility, and then goal 3.2, celebrating our students and staff. So what's new with the Buffaloes? What was new last year with the Buffaloes? We increased our our department GPA for the 3rd straight year. It may be 4 years, but I wasn't there 4 years ago to tell you whether or not it was actually increased. The biggest reason I believe, and our coaches believe, for this increase in GPA is because last year was the first year in as many years as I can remember that we actually had a study hall. We had kids struggling early on, and those of you that have had kids in activities and sports, some of those coached individually had study hall after school or on Mondays or on Thursdays or after practice. The problem that we were running into is when they would go to those study halls, our coach may not know how to do advanced trigonometry or how to do chemistry or those different things. So what we did this year, our coaches came to me and I sat down with them and they kind of expressed their concerns with them trying to help our kids with those things. So what I was able to do was go and talk to some teachers, and it literally took about 4 phone calls. And we set up study hall on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, open to everybody in the school from the time school got out for an hour. And on every day of the week, we had math and science, and 2 days of the week we had social studies, the other 2 days of the week we had science. And one great thing that came out of it was our coaches started telling our kids, listen, you can't go to practice until you get your grades taken care of. And they finally had a place to send them where they knew they would go and check in and could actually get some real work done. And it ended up showing up. You know, one program that did amazing things in the classroom this year was football. They had 101 athletes. They had 9 athletic trainers, another 10 student managers, and by the time it was all said and done, at the end of the year, they only had 2 kids on the eligibility report. And that's at the end of the year when they've been away from the coaches for 3/4 of the year. So our coaches and those athletes did a good job of utilizing that study hall. Something new that we implemented, it's been a process, is peak performance. Life of an athlete, peak performance. It encompasses all our activities and all our athletics. One thing that we saw coming down was, and we've seen it for years, a big issue with social emotional health for our kids. That social emotional health for our kids, we've seen it coming, and we've seen it coming with social media and, you know, everything going on in society. We knew we had to do something. So we implemented peak performance over the course of the year. We had 3 big time speakers come and speak to our, not only just student athletes and activity people, but the general student population on the importance of positive mental health, dealing with mental issues. And one of the most impactful ones was Mark Potter down there in the left-hand corner. You know, after these assemblies get over, it's crazy to see the number of kids that stick around and wait around just wanting to talk to somebody. When we did that, we made sure we called in all our counselors, we called in extra social worker help, and just the number of kids that stuck around and just needed somebody to talk to. And finally, you know, the big thing Mark talked about was don't be ashamed of it. And those kids sticking around and some teachers sticking around and actually getting that help and not being ashamed of getting that help anymore was very powerful. Our second annual homecoming parade, 2 years ago we brought back the homecoming parade. Last year it was huge, it was giant, much bigger than what we anticipated. There were kids everywhere. We were able to bring in almost every single elementary school was involved, both intermediate centers, both middle schools, and tons of community members. Packed Main Street for our second annual parade. Military Appreciation Night last year. The first football game of the year, we always salute our veterans. Last year was extra special. Bob Becker passed away. Prior to that, if you don't know, he was in a motorcycle accident. But just prior to this, Bob has been coming to our football games for a long time. Him and his group of veterans have been coming for a long time. And we were able to pay tribute to him last year. And it was actually the largest gathering we'd ever had of veterans at one of our military appreciation nights. Pretty humbling to be around a bunch of World War II and Korea veterans, but also with the war in Iraq just wrapping up in Afghanistan, having those guys be a part of it was pretty touching. WAC leadership team. Something new that really, as hard as it is to say, myself and the AD at Dodge City, we got together and as kind of a way to mend some fences and make sure, you know, the Dodge Garden rivalry, and for Hayes, it's Hayes and Great Bend, that rivalry doesn't go too overboard. We actually got together and we worked with Uncommon athlete Joe Coles, and we all brought groups of students together, and we met 4 times throughout the year, and those students worked together and talked about a lot of the things that we were talking about in peak performance with mental health issues, building community within your school, and they worked together to talk about ideas within the school. And it was nice to see kids from Liberal and Dodge and Garden and Hayes all working together, because most of the time, the only time they see each other is on the competition field, or whether it's with band or football or volleyball or the league art show. It's always some sort of competition. So it was nice getting those kids together and showing everybody that everybody's the same. We're all high school kids, we're all adults. It's all a good group of kids. We earned the School of Excellence in Civic Engagement last year. We'll talk about this here in a minute. We were able to go up to Topeka and accept the award for the Excellence of Civic Engagement. We'll talk about why here in a little bit. And then we started the first annual League Art Show last year. We had been talking in the school for a while about having an art show. I proposed to our art teachers a League Art Show. Not many of the schools were overly excited about that, so we started it without them. Now it's going to be held in Garden City every year, and everybody has finally jumped on board, and we've created a League Art Show for the rest of the league to be a part of. Civic engagement. So we won the Civic Engagement Award last year, and a big part of that were groups, whether it's activities groups or athletic groups, along with just the other groups and the other people that we had in the high school to be a part of things. One group that we spent a lot of time with last year, our activities and athletic people raised money for, was the Heartland Cancer Center. Multiple groups were involved with raising funds and donating those funds to the Heartland Cancer Center. Meals on Wheels, we had a group of student athletes go and deliver Meals on Wheels, which is always fun for them to do, to go ride around town and deliver those meals. Big Brothers Big Sisters, Family Crisis Services, they've become a great partner for us. We did a couple different things with them last year. We start out every Thanksgiving, and we've been doing this for a couple of years. We go and we have some student athletes and activities kids get with our cooks. We have Dylan's, they'll graciously donate 25 turkeys for us every Thanksgiving. And then our kids get with our cooks, and we actually cook the turkeys and then go and deliver those turkeys to the Family Crisis Services, and they hand those out for Thanksgiving. And then we turn around a couple months later, and our athletes and activities kids go and they collect a whole bunch of toys. They do a toy drive and do the same thing and deliver it to Family Crisis Services. And they'll go out and deliver those toys for kids that may not have those opportunities in their households.
Are there specific groups that do that, or is it a school-wide
So
activity?
it's specific, not specific groups. It's our winter groups that do that.
Okay.
Yeah. So our winter groups actually do the toy drive, and then our fall groups do the Thanksgiving turkey. And it didn't really. The first year we did it was 2 years ago, and you kind of wonder how much of an impact you're having. And then last year we did it, and when we got back from Christmas break, I had a young man come into my office and thank me, because it was actually one of our student athletes' families that ended up, his little brothers and sisters receiving some of those toys. So it ends up being very touching when you actually, meet some of the kids that end up getting those toys. United Way, we've always had a connection with the United Way. YMCA, our athletes especially have been working with the YMCA quite often and donating quite a bit of their time. We run our football team runs a flag football league that's all donated time where they go, and the YMCA, it's actually ran by the YMCA, but our students officiate it, they coach it, they run everything with that flag football and tackle football league. Breakfast with badges, I forgot the badges part. We continued our breakfast with badges for the third straight year. Something new that we did this year, because I think we spend a lot of time thanking our community and giving back to our community, but we probably don't spend enough time giving back to our teachers. Thank a Teacher this year and Teacher Appreciation Night. Thank a Teacher ended up becoming something that we didn't expect. A couple of our coaches, they actually started it, and what ended up happening was there ended up being all of a sudden, and they did it on Tuesdays, all of a sudden Twitter filled up with teachers and students thanking each other for giving of time and giving of, staying after school and coming before school. Down there on the bottom, we actually lost Doc Herdman, but down there on the bottom is Refugio Charas, big teddy bear, and Doc Herdman, one of their pictures from Thank a Teacher Day. I talked about Military Appreciation Night. One thing that Garden City High Schools, we may as well change some of our team names to the Garden City Moving Company, because between basically our wrestlers and our football team, but our wrestlers, Coach Pareto, it seems like gets a call every other day, and they're moving somebody out of a house into a new house, moving people that can't move themselves. And then Finney County Fair Association, one of the funner things that I've been able to do is go and watch our cross-country team. Every year they go down to the Fair Association, and after the fair each day, our cross-country team goes and they pick up after the fair each morning, and it ends up being pretty interesting what they end up picking up. So it was a successful year. Again, for the 7th straight year, we were the WAC Cup champions. American Implement has graciously donated to the Western Kansas Athletic Conference, and we were again WAC champions. To put it into perspective on how successful we were as an athletic group, we won 11 WAC conference championships. The rest of the WAC combined only had 10. So between Liberal, Great Bend, Dodge, and Hayes, they had 10 combined WAC championships. We had 11. We had 10 players of the year, so we had 10 people voted on by the coaches of the WAC to be the best player in their sport. And we had 11 coaches of the year, again, voted on by the coaches. The point totals there at the bottom. How the WAC Cup works is we keep track of how everybody finishes in league standings, and if you finish first, you get 10 points, second, 8 points, third, 6 points, 4, and 0. And for a second straight year, and again, this is the only time it's ever happened over these 2 years, we did not finish last in any sport or activity, which is pretty amazing for the number of sports and activities that we have. Something new that I've met with the middle school principals and athletic directors. Something new that we're going to start keeping track of is participation numbers. If you look on the left, these are what we call CASHA activities in athletics. So you have everything from baseball to wrestling, from band to the athletic training staff. In total, we had 1,545 CASHA activity members. Now, some of these kids may have played multiple sports. We don't have a ton that play 3 sports. We do have a few that play 2 sports. Over on the right side, we have all our different clubs, from art club to JAG to AVID, all the way down to YE and yearbook. That's over on the right side. In total, there were about 1,348 participants in clubs. So in total, we ended up with 2,893 total participants throughout the school year. That's an average of 1.41 activities per student. So each kid in our school, each student in our school is on average involved in at least 1.4 activities. And as you guys know, as we've talked about a million times, the more kids that are involved in activities, the more success they're going to have in all of their school endeavors.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Is there a way to separate out the kids that do multiple activities or sports to the point where we can get a grip on how many kids are not participating?
Yeah, I'm not that good at Skyward, but I'm sure somebody is that good at Skyward to where we could kind of separate that out and figure that out.
Like,
Are you speaking like athletics and activities, and like if one kid is involved in one thing.
Yeah, well, I would like to, it'd be interesting to know, well, I have two thoughts. First, because the district has gotten as big as it's gotten, participation in some of these sports or activities is actually highly competitive.
Yeah.
And you see that with the amount of time and the kids are dedicating to the activity even in the summertime, in order to try to keep up with the skill levels of the kids that surround them or that are in their conference.
Yeah.
So you have this possibility that as the activity skill levels ratchet up, that you're getting kids that are getting left behind. And some schools address this by having intramurals on the side so that any kid that doesn't have talent but wants to play something still has a way to get involved or engaged.
Yeah.
So I worry about like how much the skill level is ratcheting up, and I wonder when I see your numbers, how many kids are getting left behind?
Well,
I think about them the most.
you think about, so basketball is a great example of what you're talking about. We have, when Coach Holloway has tryouts for basketball, we can only keep so many kids.
Right.
It's a cut sport. So by the time it's all said and done, he has 40 spots for kids to play basketball. Theater has become a lot the same because of the success of our theater. There's only so many spots in Pippin, and I completely understand what you're saying. So
How do you address that long term?
that's the question. And the way that we try to address it, we've done things like add boys swimming. Boys swimming fits a great niche of kids that generally aren't going to be wrestlers. They're probably not going to be basketball players. So it fits a group of kids, and luckily we have a great swimming coach where we can start a program like that, and instantly he almost has 30 kids out for boys swimming. Something big, and it's over on the right-hand side, that's coming along. It's coming along in Keisha, and it's coming along statewide is esports. If you guys e-gaming, it's becoming more and more popular, and now you have Kansas City schools that are actually competing in e-gaming. And so clubs like that, sports like that continue to grow. Girls wrestling was just approved. It'll be interesting to see how many girls we can pull into girls wrestling and get those girls involved. But we probably, and years ago we did have intramurals. We used to have intramural basketball. We used to have intramural soccer. Again, meeting some of those kids' needs that they don't want to play basketball. It was during the wintertime. They don't want to play basketball. Maybe they didn't make the basketball team, but they still want to play basketball with their friends in a competitive, semi-competitive fashion. So maybe it's looking at bringing back some of those things, like intramurals, like you talked about.
I'd just be interested to see at some point participation levels if you took out the multi-sport kids. Because, for example, you brought up the boys swim team. I actually know most of those kids on the boys swim team. And I can tell you that none of those boys are not engaged in this.
No,
In other words, if they didn't have the
well, there's a few, but
but for the most of those kids were already pretty engaged in school. And my mind is always working on how do we engage kids that are not engaged, that are getting lost.
yeah.
And I don't have the answer. I'm just,
Well,
I'd like to see numbers.
kind of along the same lines that you talk about is, that's what was so impressive about the football squad this year in maintaining that all the way throughout the year, because we do have certain sports and activities that once that eligibility is not in place anymore, you see those grades start to plummet because they don't have that constant engagement of something like an intramural activity, something that helps them maintain those rigorous grade standards. Yeah.
There's a couple zeros and a few zeros.
Couple zeros over here, yeah. HOSA, we didn't, in talking with Ms. Snyder, it wasn't very active this year. A lot of times, the zero, like chess club up there, chess club, we didn't have a sponsor this year. We're hoping to get a sponsor in the future. We didn't have any kids when we did our beginning of the year club drive. We didn't have any kids come in and expressed any interest in the chess club. CABS and HOSA are very closely connected. Again, it's just kind of the nature of the beast. Some of these activities, if you don't have somebody involved and passionate about that activity, you're going to struggle to get people. And a lot of these over here are not paid positions. And when a lot of times, if we're not going to pay somebody to spend all this extra time, that's what's been, pretty amazing about robotics. And we talk a lot about robotics. Mr. Durbinski, for all these years, he's been doing that for free. And finally this year, we're going to be able to get him paid. But for him to grow a club and put that much time and dedication into it and never receive a check, that's pretty impressive. But that's where we struggle with some of these clubs. Some of these clubs, if the staff members may not want to spend a whole lot of time driving participation into those groups, unlike a lot of our athletic groups. You see some small numbers like girls golf. We were down in girls golf. We've been down in girls golf a couple years in a row now. We're finally seeing an uptick. Girls golf, it's a community event. If we don't have golf courses that are really pushing youth golf is one of those sports that kids aren't overly willing to try. Now our golf coach has done a great job of dragging more and more girls. We're going to have 14 to 15, which is a golf team, what you need to have. We have 6 on a team, so we have a JV and a varsity, and that's 12. And some of the stuff that you talk about that's a limiting factor to things like golf. Tennis has done a great job. Coach Robinson has done a great job with tennis because he just keeps taking more and more kids. And luckily, tennis in Western Kansas, we can find, we can send our kids over to Scott City and go to a really close meet. And they don't have very many kids at that meet, so we can send 12 kids to that meet and get a bunch of our kids court time just because all these other schools don't have the number of tennis players we do.
Do the majority of the activities they want us to be after school?
Yeah.
Do you think that's part of the?
That is, I think it is part of it because things like HOSA, things like CABS, those used to be a lot larger, but because of one of the problems, and it's just the nature of the beast, when we went to a 7-period day, the way we structured our mentoring time changed, and that was oftentimes when those kids could meet during mentoring in those clubs with those clubs and those activity groups. Well, when we had to divide that up and keep the freshmen in freshman land, and blue has their mentoring time, and yellow has their mentoring time, and red has their mentoring time, now as a club or group, they can't all get together anymore, and a teacher's mentoring time may only fit for the Blue Academy kids. So that time isn't available anymore. So the only time that they have is either before school or after school. And as you guys know, with busing services, we're pretty limited on the amount of time that they can actually meet before they have to, 0 time after school. Before school, they have a little bit more time. But that is a limiting factor to our after-school activities.
When you brought up the tennis, it made me think of that. And this may be later in your presentation, but I have noticed that tennis and I think cross country has really worked at partnering with the middle schools for summer activities, and I think tennis maybe spring or somewhere in there, and getting those middle school kids involved so they know what's there, or if they're interested in tennis and haven't played, then that opportunity is there for them to learn before they get to 9th grade.
Yeah, so it was probably more than 8 years ago. When we were going through budget cuts, we used to have middle school tennis, and that's one of those things that we started to cut when we started cutting things. We went to activities first and cut things like middle school tennis, a lot of C-team stuff at the high school. A lot of those things were the initial cuts in our budget cuts. And so what our coaches have done, and it is later on in my slides, but one of the things our coaches have done, because they understand how important participation rate is our tennis teams, for example, do our middle school tennis club. So in the spring, we invite middle schoolers to come over, and our coaches actually help the middle schoolers, our coaches along with some of our players, help the middle school and teach them the basic fundamentals of tennis. Golf is a lot the same way out of Buffalo Dunes. Coach Speck does a lot of junior golf stuff. We just started junior soccer with both our boys and girls soccer teams, which, as you guys know, with our community, it's just every time they meet, every week that they meet, that group is just getting larger and larger and larger with those young kids. Youth football has always been around. Our high school has always been heavily involved with youth football. Youth volleyball has become giant. Coach Bailey with those volleyball girls starting in 3rd and 4th grade and then 5th and 6th grade, when they come into the gym. I mean, what's ended up happening because of participation is we just, quite frankly, have run out of space. Because all of our coaches at this point, almost all of our coaches have some sort of youth program or connection to the middle school that they're trying to build and trying to grow, and we're just running out of space. I'll come back to it. So this is one of the things that we've talked about going forward this year, and meeting with my coaches and our coaches is, and talking to them, the biggest thing to them, it's just like anything else. If we can't grow youth participation in these activities and clubs, then when they get to the high school, it's too late. Most kids aren't going to try to become tennis players when they get to the high school. They're not going to try to become something once they get to the high school because they think it's too late because it's become so competitive. So we're trying to grow it through the youth so they don't think that that's necessarily the case. In the bigger cities, it's not coaches at the high school that have to do that. In Kansas City, as you guys know, if you want to be a dancer, it's not the high school coach that teaches your young sons and daughters how to dance. It's not the high school coach that's teaching them how to play basketball, or a youth robotics club isn't ran by the high school coach. In our situation where we're located, it has to be our high school coaches that lead and drive and develop all of those things for kids. And our community has been great at supporting those high school coaches to be able to do that. Some of the things that we're looking for moving forward to this year, and these goals are goals that we've had, our coaches and I have had over the last couple of years. The holistic student athlete, we continue to measure our graduation rates up at the high school. This will be the first year that I'm going to start measuring graduation rates of activities and athlete students. So we're going to specifically target those students and check graduation rates on those specific kids to see how it compares to the rest of our student body, but also to see how it compares to the state. Academic achievement, we've been tracking student athlete and student activity kids' GPAs for a number of years now. Mental wellness, I'm sure you guys have heard of SABRES. I'm sure they've talked to you guys about SABRES. That's one thing that the counselors and our coaches have got together and discussed in depth is how can we use that SABRES data, that social emotional data, to help our coaches meet the mental health needs of those students in those activities and clubs. And that's going to be interesting because this will be the first year that last year we trialed it, we started working it in. This will be the first year that we start working and trying to address those needs and those issues for those students. Win championships. The big thing for us is we want to finish in the top 8 of every activity and sport that we're involved in. That's a goal we reach for. Now we have some sports like bowling and wrestling, golf, that if they don't finish in the top 3, it's probably a disappointing season. But for the majority of our sports, top 8 is where we hope to finish in 6A. We do very well in the western half of the state. When you compare all sports and all activities, there's an argument between us and Manhattan and Derby, who has the best athletic and activities program. When you look at specific sports, like Derby has a heck of a football team, they've had a heck of a football team for a number of years, but then you look at other sports and they don't do well at all. One thing I pride our coaches and sponsors on is our band is good, our theater is good, our tennis team is good. Every single one of our sports is on solid footing. Unlike if you go and look at other high schools, that's one thing that I'm proud of our school as being, as a whole, all of our activities, clubs, and groups are on very solid footing. Generating this, the necessary funds to accomplish our goals. Our community is great. They give us, you guys give us in our community through donations and fundraising. We're able to meet all the needs of our students to make sure they're getting what they need, and then build excitement in the Buffalo community that leads to increased participation. So like I talked about before, the two things that we're going to focus on this year, as an athletic department, we have to get better at communicating. We're still trying to navigate, and I'm still trying to navigate the best way of communicating with players, activity kids, parents, the community, all those different groups and partners, and then our coaches, like we talked about, growing participation numbers.
It's an interesting challenge you got there, because you got to figure out who best to talk to, the athlete, or the athlete and the parents.
Yeah.
Or the athlete doesn't seem to pay attention to any of the details, it's mom that's doing it, or et cetera, et cetera. So,
yeah, and the thing that we've struggled with is email isn't necessarily great. It's good for some parents, not great for others. You know, social media, I've kind of went on a Facebook hiatus, and I'm sticking mainly to like Twitter, and parents are the same way. You know, some parents may be on Facebook, some parents may not be involved in social media. Instagram, I have no idea what's going on. Don't even talk about Snapchat because it's way over my head. So it is interesting to see how to talk to parents and get that information to them, so that that break in the communication maybe between student and parent doesn't happen. Yeah.
Do you leave that mostly at coaches' discretion? Or?
Yeah. So we do a couple things. We actually in service on social media stuff. You know, when we talk at the beginning of the year, we talk about making sure that when you communicate, you let parents know, all right, the medium of communication for girls basketball is going to be Facebook. So make sure parents, you follow our Facebook page, and it may be Facebook and email. That's the way we're going to communicate. Remind, you know, most of our groups have some form of remind app to where they're texting parents, but communication, it can always be better. You know, anytime we have parent issues, 99% of the time it's poor communication. You know, either between the student and the parent, the coach and the parent, maybe me and the parent. It normally ends up becoming a communication issue. Any other questions that maybe I didn't answer?
I have one, I guess, and more to put a bug in your ear about it. Maybe not breaking that, I don't know. I just have a question on how students who are in multiple sports, I know there's practices and camps throughout the summer, how they deal with that, especially ones that are wanting to work or balance that out, and what's required versus what is optional.
Yep.
And when I have parents approach me about that, I just want to know how to answer that question
Sure.
specifically.
Now, so the summer has become, and our coaches talk about it the same way, it's become a nightmare. Because what has happened is Keisha's allowed free reign in the summer, so you can base from the day after Memorial Day until the week after 4th of July, you go and you do whatever you want. Besides the 4th of July week, you go and do whatever you want. And what ended up happening, our coaches felt like if we're not doing stuff, we're getting left behind, that mentality. So, and part of it was, to be quite honest with you, they thought if we're not doing something and we end up, our band ends up not being as good as Dodge's band, or our baseball team gets beat by Great Bend's baseball team and they're doing something, parents are going to look at us and say, why aren't you doing more? Kids are going to look at us and say, why aren't you doing more? And so 4 and 5 years ago, it was especially crazy. You had coaches scheduling practice on top of other coaches, and kids having to decide, do I go to this practice, or do I go to weights, or do I go to that practice? So what we did 2 years ago is all the coaches and I now get together, and we take time and we sit together and we decide, all right, you get 2 days a week. And so, you know, one group may go on Monday, and one group would go on Monday and Wednesday for the girls, and the other groups would go on Tuesday and Thursday for the girls, and everybody was getting Friday off. Now, there's a couple of exceptions like dance and cheer, but for the most part, that's how we divided up the summer. So a kid didn't have to choose between, you know, whether if she's a volleyball player and a basketball player, going to volleyball or going to basketball. So we divided those days up first. The next thing we did is we said after 11 o'clock in the morning, everybody has to be out of the high school. And besides our middle school kids because of how they went. But so we said at 11 o'clock, everybody needs to be out of the high school. We need to give these kids time to go be kids and go get jobs and go do those things. So that's the direction we went with it. And then we've always given them the 4th of July week off. And then after that, they get a break. And so that's kind of how we divided it up. It's not perfect, but I will say we're the only ones doing it in 6A that I've spoken
It's
to.
encouraging though, because you're putting a plan out there and thinking of those kids needing some of that
Yes.
time. And not just working, but like you said, to be kids and do that kind of stuff. I think there's a happy balance in everything is, you can only work on something for so long before it starts to be detrimental.
Yeah. And kids get that way too. They want to keep going and going and going, and sometimes you have to, in order to keep that energy toward that activity high, you need to pull it away from them. You take it away from them. I got elected to the Acacia Board of Directors last year, and one thing that I brought to their attention, and hopefully we can get some momentum. I haven't been able to get a ton of momentum, but I want to eventually get the month of July to where the only thing our kids can do is some form of lifting or conditioning. And we have to keep that going. I'm sure you guys have seen in the news with the health ramifications of kids going outside and early in the fall and when it's hot and sticky and dry. If they don't have that summer conditioning, it causes issues. So I would eventually like to be where the month of July, our coaches, the only thing they're talking to their kids for is conditioning and summer months. But that's if I can get enough momentum through Acacia.
Can I ask you, what do you foresee in the future with, especially the activities that like to participate in nationals, and these trips getting to be large and sometimes protracted? They are doing apparently a lot of fundraising, because I get lots of requests for fundraising on participation in nationals. And it's sort of the mindset that whatever you did last year, you have to kind of take it to the next level.
Yeah.
More kids and maybe a farther traveling distance. Do you even have thoughts about teams traveling or how far?
Yeah, we do. We've Dr. Carlin and Heath and myself met toward the end of last year, and we're in the process of putting together a protocol for how to handle all these national trips. One of the problems that is starting to happen is everybody has nationals. The one nice thing about those people over there, our Acacia activities, besides the ones down here, they don't have national events. So that limits that, but when you start talking about clubs and activities, every single one of those groups has some sort of national event, and most of them have more than one national event. So Dr. Carlin and Heath had a conversation with me last year, and we're going to put together some sort of plan to say, all right, this is the national event that we think is appropriate, and in meeting with the sponsors and coaches, this is the national event that we think is appropriate for our level.
Have you developed a policy about how much school an athlete or activity can be, how much they can miss in a particular week or in a particular month?
No, and it would be a little difficult. A lot of our sports don't necessarily miss a ton of school, but just because of our geographic location, it becomes difficult. Debate and forensics, that's a great example of one that struggles because our debate and forensics teams are very, very competitive and they're very good. B, there becomes a problem with them getting tournaments out here because there's no competitive tournaments in Western Kansas. So when they travel, they have to travel to the Wichitas, to the Manhattans, Lawrences, because those are the only places that offer not only competitive forensics and debate, but the type of forensics and the type of debate that our kids actually do. And the same goes for wrestling, and, you know, we try to, with a lot of our sports, we try to play as many games locally as we can when we go and schedule games like basketball. Because it's a long season, we try to play Hugoton, we try to play Scott City and Holcomb and Ulysses and those teams. But we also struggle, they don't want to play us. You know, football is a good example. None of those teams would want to play us. And so we end up having to travel for things like football. Our sub-varsity stuff, we do try to stay local. With football, basketball, those things, we try to play Holcomb. You know, with our freshman football team, we'll play Holcomb's and Scott City's JV team, their next level of kids. Tennis was another example, golf's another example, where we try to keep those sub-varsity kids closer to home so they're missing less school. And those varsity kids, it sometimes becomes just who we can play to fill our schedule. Swimming is another example. There's only so many pools in the state of Kansas that you can actually swim in, so it causes a bit of an issue.
One question, just speaking as a parent and talking to parents, it would be really helpful if all of the sponsors and coaches used one particular method of communicating with parents and in common, and then any other additional ones they want to remind is especially helpful, at least for most of the ones that I talk to. Just so that parents have one place to go for all of their children and all of the sports and activities. The other thing is to try to get the summer schedule out to parents as early as possible, because they want to do other things too, and they're trying to deconflict it with their students' obligations to the school, but it's hard to wait for some of those things. So if the summer schedule was out, you know, by spring break or right after, would be really helpful for me.
Yeah, so our fall activities, that's easy for them. The problem that ends up happening is a lot of our spring and even winter people, their camps aren't even scheduled until spring. So those camps that they may go to don't end up getting scheduled until the spring once, because they're oftentimes at some college location. Once those college seasons are over, then they finally schedule their summer camps. But it is one thing that we talked about, and we're actually going to start a meeting earlier because we've heard that complaint a few times. And maybe what it ends up being is we're going to meet, you know, in December and put that calendar out, and you're just going to have to find a camp during this block of time that you go to instead of picking the one that you really wanted to go to.
Right, because I think that we ask parents to support us in their academics, but a lot of these teach soft skills and teamwork, and we want parent support for that too.
Yeah.
So the more information we can provide, the better
Yep.
we'll get that.
Okay, we can work on that for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much for your presentation. And good luck this season. It's
Thank
been a
you.
year.
You're right. Hopefully we can win a Nathan Whack Cups. Have a good night, guys.
All right, well, we have page 8, and talking about the budget.
All right, so last meeting, we talked a little bit about the budget. Hopefully you've all had a chance to peruse your binders. They've given you lots of fantastic information. Just as a reminder, we're going to do a quick overview of the budget presentation I did last time. Just hit a few points, and then we will talk about any questions that you have. So, our general fund for last year's budget, for this year's budget is $55 million. Last year it was $52.7 million, which is an increase of $2.3 million. Primarily, that increase comes from the change in state funding, the result of the recent court case. We do have a little slight decrease in student headcount, but the majority of those dollars are going to come from that increase in base state aid per pupil, as well as a small bit from special education funding that's increasing for next year. The local option budget looks pretty boring. 16.8 last year, it'll be 16.8 this year. So no change in the local option budget. And just a reminder again, when we talk about the new dollars that we are receiving, primarily from state funding, kind of what we do to look at where we want to put those dollars. Number one, we want to invest in our staff. We want to make sure we have the best possible, possibly trained teachers, we want to have the best people working with our students. Second, we want to invest in research and evidence-based programming. What programs, what tools are going to be good for our kids that actually have proven outcomes. And number three is reducing local property taxes. We talked a little bit about we will be able to reach 1 and 2. Number three, we won't be able to reach yet, primarily just because we're not back to the level of funding that we were at previously. Here's your enrollment summary. The changes in state funding, now look at the last 2 years of enrollment, and that's kind of where we start out when we look at what our funding is going to be for the current year. As you can see, we did have a decrease well over the last 3 years, but we look back to 2016 and look the 2 years we get to look at for this budget are 17 and 18. The greater of those two numbers is actually still a decrease from 2016. So that did affect our funding for this year. The assessed valuation also played a factor in our funding for this year. We did have a decrease in assessed valuation, which didn't help us a whole lot. But because of some other changes that we have going on, the proposed budget will stay flat at 48.8 mils, and you can see that we've held that flat for the last 4 years. So a couple things that we talked about on the mill levy calculations, some things that were positively impacting us. For the next couple of years, we're going to have a decrease in bond and interest payments for the slight dip as some bond issuances go out and we're being completely paid off, and then before the new ones come on board and get completely ramped up, we do have a slight lull in our bond and interest payments that we're going to need to pay. And the increase in bond and interest state aid, we're also getting a higher percentage of state aid in the bond and interest fund this year. The negative impact factors, I probably should have added there too, just the decline in enrollment that we talked about, but then also the decrease in assessed valuation. So here we are at August 5th. We'll have a discussion and I'll answer any questions that you have. Hopefully we'll get your approval to publish, and then at the next board meeting we will have a public hearing and hopefully adopt the budget. Are there any questions about wonderful, fantastic red binders? Going once? But if there's no questions, then I would just request that we have your permission to publish, so. Dr. Carlton, go.
Probably need a motion to approve publication of the proposed budget.
Can I get a motion for the approval of the budget
So moved.
publication? Okay, second? All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? Great, thank you. Thank you.
You didn't get any hard questions.
I like that. We'll move to new business. And the first item is Administrator Personnel Handbook. I believe Tim might lead us in that discussion.
Yeah, I asked that the administrative personnel handbook be removed from the consent agenda, specifically so that we can discuss the administrative raises. I was trying to memorize the hand sign for anxiety or stress that she used. I didn't get it memorized, but it's really tough to try to have a discussion about administrative pay in front of a group of such talented administrators. one of which is sitting pretty close to me. But from what I understand, there has not been a separation of this discussion from the teaching salary percentage raises, at least in anyone's near memory. I don't know, those of you, Tim, who's been on the board, I don't know if you remember ever having this separation, but what's occurred for as long as anyone can remember is that whatever percentage increase the teachers have received, that's been a percentage increase the administrators have received. And I'm not very good at explaining my concern about this, but my concern is related primarily to the spread in real dollars and salaries. And so I took an example to maybe help try to illustrate this a little bit better because I've had my math called in question, so I went over it a couple times. If we had a fictitious teacher who made $50,000 per year, and we had a fictitious administrator who made $100,000 a year, and we did what we did last year, which was we gave both of them a 4% raise, the teacher would go to $52,000 and the administrator would go to $104,000. So in 1 year, the spread from the administrator to my fictitious teacher would go from $50,000 to $52,000 as a real dollar spread between the two of them. Now I get that there's steps and levels and educational levels, so this is all fiction, but it's just trying to illustrate my point. If you bring that through at year 5, the difference between our two fictional staff members moves from $50,000 to $58,000. I'm assuming a 4% raise. Now, the board, I think, pretty confidently has expressed a desire to really try as much as we can to try to get the teacher salaries up. So we have, at least in the 2 years that I've been on the board, we've given a 4% raise. Now, if we have a 2% cost of living, that means that they actually feel an extra 2% in their paycheck. But in terms of real dollars, if you continue on doing that, by the 5th year, the spread between the staff or the teacher and the administrator has grown. And if you take that out 10 years, the spread between the two of them has gone from 50,000 to 71,000. So if you keep giving higher paid administrators the same percentage raise as you do teachers, what you create is you create a real dollar difference between their actual pay that grows over the years. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. Now, I spent a lot of time talking to Dr. Carlin about this and sort of the downside of bringing some of this up and maybe even considering, for example, the 2% raise, which would be the cost of living, in other words, freezing the administrative salaries and allowing a 4% raise for the school teachers. And I really see the validity of a lot of his thoughts on why you would not want to split those. His first concern is team cohesion. And as a very small business owner, I kind of get that because team dynamics are so important. We know that team dynamics between our administrators and our teachers are so critical to the function of the overall system. But it did occur to me that we also have a third tier of employees, which are unclassified personnel. And the team dynamics between the teachers and a para, for example, are also incredibly important. We have not, at least to my knowledge, we have not passed the same percentage raise on to non-classified personnel that we have to classified personnel. So if we are thinking about, I mean, we've given them a raise, yes, but it's not been automatic, where it's 4% teachers, that means 4% administrators, that means 4% for non-classified personnel. So this notion that, that if you don't keep all of them at the same percentage raise could cause stress in team dynamics, then that logic is not so far extended to the non-classified personnel. I think certainly I worried a ton about implying a lack of value with our administrators. And that probably causes the most stress for me, because when I spent an hour with KG on the budget today, and if you ever want to be really impressed with what's in this binder, just keep going back to KJ and having her summarize it, and for me, dumbing it down until I finally could say to myself, I think I get this. And I really felt so much more confident in my ability to vote for this budget tonight and how the money is being managed. And there's always confidence when she says, we really don't have the money. But if you go and spend some time with her, you realize we really don't have the money. And how lean the budget has been, and how well she's done to build up all these things. And so that, and I could use examples for Heath. I mean, he's traveling all over the place. And I know some of the administrators personally, so to talk about their salaries or not giving them as much of a raise as been recommended is extremely stressful, because it implies that I don't have the money. And that is just so not the case. There isn't anyone in this district that's getting paid what they're worth in all likelihood. But my new favorite word is, we only have so many buckets, and each bucket only has so much in it. And I've used this phrase before, it's either or. We just don't know what the or is. We've had a lot of requests for consideration of extra administrators in the 3 schools that don't have full-time administrators. And I had this faint hope that somehow, if we considered a 2% raise instead of 4% for the administrators, that it would cover that unfilled need. And KJ did the math for me, helped me with the math. If we did 2% instead of 4%, we would save about 67,000. So not even half, or a third of what we need if we were to add 3 administrators.
It's about half, depending on which way you go.
Which way you go.
TOSAs or administrators,
Yeah.
but you would need an additional approximately 50,000 if you wanted TOSAs, and an additional 75 if you wanted.
So 57,000 doesn't necessarily cover this huge immediate need that we have. And that's not really my point. My point is, again, the spread in real dollars. But if you think about it secondarily, 57,000 this time, more than 57,000 next time, because of the exponential change if you keep giving the 4% across the board. And if you take the 57,000 and then you extrapolate it out 10 years, now you're at 570,000, because these salaries don't go away. These are constant overheads. Once you increase somebody's salary, it's not coming back down unless we replace the administrator. So it isn't about their value. And I don't have a predetermined thought in mind about where, if we did make a change in the percentage increase, I don't have a predetermined idea about where it should be. In fact, I think it might be overreach on my part to even suggest it, because I think I want to try to just say to ourselves, we only have so much money. If we spend this money here, we can't spend it somewhere else, and I don't know where the other place would be. And it might be Dr. Carlin's place to say, if we had the extra money, this is where we might put it, so that if you wanted to see the either or, at least you could see it. Right now, I'm just saying the either. The other thing that strikes me, Dr. Carlin's been really good about pointing out that when you look at state averages, our administrators are now at the middle. They're at the middle, they're below the middle. But Carlin's salary for a school district this size is below what his peers are making. And so I don't mean to imply they're overpaid. But what does hit me is that unlike our teachers, don't seem to have a hard time attracting candidates for administration. In fact, we usually have multiple candidates for administration. In fact, they're quite often some of our best teachers. And so I have to, at least as a small business owner, ask, are we at market value, or are we at least high enough in market value so that we're attracting talent? And my short time on the board is, at least my experience is, yeah, we are attracting talent. Do they deserve more? Of course, so does everybody else. But at least we're attracting the talent. At least we have multiple candidates. At least we have a choice, unlike a lot of the teaching positions that we can't even fill. And so I don't have, I don't have any other thoughts besides that. I told Dr. Carlin today, maybe the only thing I accomplished this year is I get us in the habit of at least every year having this discussion. So it isn't so uncomfortable, because it is extremely uncomfortable. At least it is for me.
So, did you just want to have a discussion, or did you want to perhaps even reevaluate or evaluate for the first time, maybe, the process that we look at when we're talking about raises? Because what you mentioned was that we automatically group them together.
That's the
And are
part I
we
have a problem.
asking that we change that procedure, or that, I don't even know if it's just, Dr. Carlin, and maybe you can help with this, it's just the way it's always been, or is that a process or a procedure, like a formal process or procedure? Is there something we could have a discussion and look at about separating that in the future?
The board, you have the authority to set that. I would say, to my knowledge, probably for the last 20 to 25 years in this district, and while I agree with almost everything Dr. Hannigan has shared as far as factual, I think it is factual that our classified staff, our certified staff, and our administrative staff have all received the same percentage increase for probably the last 20 to 25 years as a group. That's been something longstanding. I think the only exception to that I'm aware of is, it was back probably 2010, 2011, 2012, somewhere in there, when the state was doing mid-year cuts. There was a year where administrators were frozen, and teachers and classified staff received their step and their experience and their education increases, and the administrators stayed frozen. The following year, the board, when we knew we could handle the cuts, the board made that up and put everybody back where they would have been. But to my knowledge, probably in the last 20 to 25 years, that's been the only time that it's been differentiated. But you can do it however you want. You have the authority to do that. That has been the practice ever since I've been the deputy superintendent, and in my time as superintendent.
With the rest of the board, I'm just throwing out this idea, Tim, and you can let me know what you think about it, and have an opportunity to ask questions to Dr. Garland, or think about questions, and could this be something that we discuss at the retreat about possibly evaluating it and coming up with what we feel might be appropriate for next year when we're looking at salary raises? Or is
I would be interested in, of course, data's always nice. The more you have, the better it is, but usually you don't have enough. I've heard from other boards the same discussion, and also the difficulty of having this discussion. But I don't have any numbers to say what other districts have. We have our history, but we don't necessarily have market history. And I don't agree that we are successful in every case. This is just anecdotal from my perspective. Being able to get in every position that's been open for administrators the kind of talent that we would like to choose from. And so there's, I think, still an argument to be attentive to to that reality as well. A lot of times we're able to grow from within. I think there's a cognizant plan to do that. Any organization our size, I think, should be doing that. But with that said, I think there are times when we have to choose from what comes in the door and in the time allowed. And I don't feel confident that we have always been able to choose from the kind of talent pool that we hope to. So I think we've got to be able to keep the incentives in there at some point. As a community, it's common knowledge. I mean, it's pretty basic math about this, what happens after, I think you said 10 years, the difference in pay. Just from my limited experience, I went through that one circumstance where we had some hard choices to make, and we made them more on the administrator than we did, kind of recognizing some of that history, just again from my perspective. I think it's a healthy discussion. I would be interested in some data to think about this as we move forward. I personally am not in favor of deviating from a percentage across the board this go around.
I don't think we can. I don't think that's possible. So we've already approved.
It would be really difficult at this point.
But I think having Tim kind of put the discussion out there kind of gave us an idea of what his thoughts were, because I'm not sure everybody maybe knew what you might be presenting to the board, Tim. And that's why I'm saying, I'm like you, Mark, I would like to have more data too, and it would give the administration some time to give us some information. That's why if we feel comfortable as a board, we have a retreat coming up, and we could put that as one of our discussion topics.
If that's enough time to get some data.
If we're comfortable with that. Yeah, that's true, because I know the start of school is coming up, but,
Well, I do know, liberal, this past year, or this past budget, they gave the teachers an increase and nothing to the administration staff, zero.
was it
I
zero?
believe.
I know it was different, I don't know if it was zero.
That's what I believe it was zero
Okay.
and teachers got it raised, but, I mean, they're only 60 miles away, we could definitely get data from them, because I remember the discussion was if we did that, that morale would be down on the administration side, if we decided not to do it, but it doesn't hurt to discuss anything like that. I mean, if we can save money, and I'm okay with discussing it, I'm not saying I'm in favor of it, but it's a good discussion to have, and, you know, visit with liberal, and, I mean, we know the superintendent, we know their administration, and see how that all worked out. Did they lose, 10 administrators because they didn't get a raise, or did they all stay and say, we support what the board did? I don't know.
So can I just get maybe like a nod approval if this is something we could do at the retreat? Is everybody, would you be interested in having a discussion at the retreat? You could just do a head or like a.
I would if there's data available.
Okay, would you be interested, Tim? Yeah.
With data.
With data? Okay, so.
And I've already accomplished what I was trying to accomplish, so I'm not trying to drive anything here tonight. It just seemed like now that I had the data in front of me, administrative handbook came in front of me, I saw what was proposed, I kind of done some research, realized what's been going on for the last number of years. I've illustrated my point about how the spread can grow. And now we know more data.
I think it was brought up when we were talking about discussion, so I think we can talk about it. Sounds good. That sounds good.
Just wanted to mention that in talking with a lot of other districts in western Kansas, administrators are in short supply. They're
research is very clear about how important a classroom teacher is in the success of a child. And very next on that list is that administrative influence, that leadership. And when we look at situations in our district where teachers are pleased with the environment that they're in, where the climate and the culture is healthy in that building, that revolves significantly around the leadership that comes from the administrator that leads that building. We will collect the data for you. I will tell you, my belief is that I think in April of 2017, we had a post-audit report that pointed out that we were low in terms of our administrative expenses. And I guarantee you, if there would have been any way to identify administrative expenses in an area where we could have reduced or done better, it would have been pointed out in that report. I think when we compare with like districts that have the kind of culture, the kind of environment that we want to have, I think you might find your data tells you something different. And it might tell you that we're not paying enough. And I'm not advocating that our administrators should get a higher increase than our teachers or our classified staff, but I think what you're going to see is that they are behind, just like our teachers are a little behind. We're trying to make up for them. And just like last year with our classified staff, when we went through a salary study to make sure that our classified staff was paid appropriately, and the consultant that we worked with shot for a range, a market range of -5% to +5%, and we didn't settle for that. We told them we wanted to be in the 0 to +5% because we felt like our positions need to be paid competitively with what the market requires. But we will be happy to gather that information, and we will have it at the retreat on the 26th. And I would appreciate if you have any other questions or information you'd like to have, if you would let me know.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thanks, Ted. Okay, so the next one is the 2019-20.
We need approval of that handbook tonight, so we.
Oh, you do need approval of it, okay.
And just to be clear, that will then set the administrative pay rates for the coming year. That's part of approving that handbook that
It's
happens
approving
each year. Right, for the coming year.
Okay.
Madam President, I so moved.
Okay, hold on one second. Are you comfortable with that? Okay. So, thank you, Mark. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure we're done with discussion with that. Okay, so we have a motion to approve the administrative personnel handbook. Can I have a second? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you. So then we'll come to the Board of Education potential meeting locations, and I actually asked for this to be put on the agenda. I think it's come up at various times if we should have meetings in our schools. Not only does that allow us to get to go into schools and kind of combine times when we're doing our board type work, but with some of the things that we've been discussing and that are going to be discussed, like reconfiguration, I think it would be a great time to go and visit these schools and getting other people in those schools as well. The calendar is already set for this year for our meetings, and with that, the different schools that are presenting and the dates of that. I personally would be in favor of going to those schools that are arranged to give us presentations, but that, I believe, is 9 schools, and that creates a lot of work as well, because obviously we're used to doing it here. We have the technology. All the public knows that the meetings are held here. So you definitely add challenges should we move meetings to different locations. There's, other options that we could do, which would be, we have a couple of short meetings planned. Those are our 5 o'clock meetings. It's been suggested that we could do those in other schools, and maybe a tour could go with that. There's actually various possibilities, but I wanted to have a little bit of more discussion about your thoughts. I think we don't have 4 from KH. So, any thoughts, board? It's only 8:15, so we're.
Doing good.
Or is this something you would like time to think about?
How much trouble does it create for everyone else who has to put the meetings on? For me, it's to show up the different locations there.
So a little bit with just getting the word out, making sure people know. Most of the time, if we went to another location, we would probably be using the cafeteria or the gym. So there would be some setup there at the school. I'm not clear if all of our schools, like, similar to what they would set up for a music program, if they have enough chairs that they're at the school, or if we'd have to bring some chairs in with our grounds people. It's all very doable. It's just gonna be some setup, and then that would all have to be cleaned up that night because that space would be used the next morning when kids arrive for breakfast and back to school. You know, it's probably manageable. Technology, we would probably have to do some AV technology setup. There could be some acoustic issues depending on the size. You know, and like in most of those gyms, like at Alta Brown, in the morning when they do morning assembly, they have a PA system they use to talk to the kids. Well, we're probably not gonna need 300 chairs set up, so, but potentially, if the acoustics are bad enough, we could be looking at having to do something with the PA system that we don't have to do in a relatively small room, so, very doable. My only suggestion would be if maybe we start on a little bit of a smaller scale, so we can kind of find out, what are some of the challenges we're gonna hit. Laura did ask me to convey the suggestion about it was actually her suggestion on the payables meetings. So I think we have one in September, one in December, and one in March. And if we moved, if we moved those and then maybe scheduled a tour and a building report instead of having those at a regular meeting, then we could kind of see how that goes. And we could work with the schools on what 3 would like to do that. And then that might become something that, as we do those building reports, maybe more and more schools would like to do that. We sure, you know, we could give that a shot, but Stephanie does a little bit of setup. Our custodian helps with a lot. But we can manage, we can make it work.
Maybe we could start with schools that have the setup already, the high school works good. We have KSP meetings that works good, and it seems that they have that set up fairly easy. And there's people that work till 11 o'clock that aren't there custodians?
Yeah, but they have a regular schedule of things that they normally take. And Works Good, KH, they would definitely be more equipped to handle that. They're used to having.
Maybe try the schools that have the capability a lot easier, well, we had all these conflicts there, and, you know, off the Brown school might not work at all. I'd like to do it at the other schools, but, you know, make it easier on the staff, do it where we have the technology a lot better than we do with some of the grades. We start there first, start small, and match that out. And, I mean, once you get an idea of how many chairs you're gonna need set up, we don't have 300 chairs set up here.
Right, that's what I'm saying. We have about 40 chairs set up here.
I would think schools would have 40 chairs. One thing?
Tim, I don't know if I know we set up 300 or 200 chairs for music program, but I don't know if we're bringing them in programs or if we're setting them up from within the school.
My suggestion would be start at KH, the high school, the ones that have it set up already, see how that goes, see how long it takes to tear down. And we didn't know all that. I don't want to overburden our staff either.
So maybe what we could do is just start with 1 or 2. I hesitate to do the ones where it's just paying the bills. I know that's the best for the board, but then we don't have people who come to the meeting getting into other schools. And part of my point is to get people into our schools as we start talking about reconfiguration and ourselves. I mean, I had to make a concerted effort, even though I grew up here, to get into some of the schools that I event there. And so I know I don't have a full-time job, as many of you do, so that's easy for me, but it may not be easy for you and or the new board members that might be getting elected in November. So to me, it's just a great opportunity to do that, but we do have a lot of meetings, so maybe we could pick one or two and see how they go. Would you all be in favor of that? Okay, so maybe Steve, I can leave it to you to see what schools might be the easiest to do that, or you and I can discuss that together.
We can work on that.
Okay, so do I need to do any kind of,
Just-
okay, we're just all in agreement?
I think that ties in real well with civic engagement. So it'd be really nice if we had the parents of perhaps students who came to those meetings because they were a little easier to get to. So, how that would work, but, maybe the timing is what we
Okay, great. Oh, sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Civic engagement is, along those lines, and Tim suggested on the high school, maybe that'd be a good forum for discussing year-round school. Or not.
get some.
That might
Okay,
get us
Madam,
started.
go ahead.
I'm gonna let you lead that discussion at the next meeting. Okay, well then we'll get on that. I'd like to maybe have a discussion with you on that. That's fine. Great, thank you. Okay, so we'll do open board discussion. Tim, do you want to start?
So,
I don't have much to add.
Jennifer? I don't have anything. I did notice that, kind of how to get back in here, we have a lot of open houses this week. So I think the high school is on Thursday, is that right? The high school, Kennesaw-Benson and Horsegood are on Thursday, and then I'm assuming, although they weren't all listed on here, that the elementaries are on Friday, is that right? They're very, okay, a lot of them are listed on Friday though, so pay attention. You
Should be
wanna-
on our website, on our newsreel.
Okay.
Roy does a pretty job with updating.
Great, I need to look at that before today, but, so, okay, that's what I got, Chief.
I just think it's exciting to start another school year, and I wanted to let you know I was interested in going to hear the speaker Thursday night. Was good. So I hope maybe some of the other board members can attend.
Tim? Thanks for making it. Mark?
I don't have anything to say.
Okay, well then with that, the next board meeting will take place on Monday, August 19th, 2019 at 6 p.m. in the board meeting room at the Educational Support Center. And I will take a motion to adjourn.
Putting the next meeting in our calendar.
We're just
So moved.
Second?
Forget.
Second? Anybody? Second. Thank you. All right, all those in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? Thank you.
That's a long time. I'll forget when the next meeting is.
Okay,